Temptation is patient, and it waits for the perfect opportunity to strike until it burns up inside of you. There's no hiding it now. Fan your flames and take charge of the unknown.
This was a Spec commercial that we shot with our production company, and it took a long time to plan, but thankfully we have a lot of great artists who were happy to contribute to the project and make it happen. We're also very lucky to work with our super talented model, Bria Fitzgerald. We shot this in one day and on the Sony FX6 with my Canon FD lenses. For the exterior shots that we did, we were pretty lucky. It was a pretty overcast day, so we didn't really need to worry too much about soft, attractive beauty light. But what we did prioritize instead was making sure that we had some sort of accent light or hair light to make the image pop a little bit more and not be as flat. What we did for this shot here was that we doubled up on a 1200D and a 600D. Now, even with the sky being pretty cloudy this day, the 1200D and the 600D were just barely pushing. We only got a little bit of that accent going on, but it still pushed the image where I needed it to be. Christian Roboto was our very talented camera operator, and we slowed down the shutter practically in camera and did multiple takes where he was tracking back and forth with our talent. Not an easy thing to do, but he nailed it every time. A lot of times I feel like cinematography is 30% lighting, 20% movement and composition, but then the rest is really location. For building this image, I want to emphasize that wet downs add so much depth and dimension. You know, prior to having this wet down right here, it was a pretty good looking image still, but it was relatively flat and one-dimensional. But adding this wet down adds so much to the image. Adds a lot of texture, adds a lot of movement even, and even the reflections on its own are an aesthetic. We also had a hazer on set, so we add a little bit more volume to the light right here. We also had a series of two lights right here in front of a 6x. And I don't know if you guys noticed, but there is a water jug that we ended up placing into the foreground of the image just because it looked interesting. There's no reason for it to be there, but it was nearby and added some extra depth into this darkness. I really loved these series of shots. I wish I could have used them a little bit more into the edit, but it made sense as a nice little B-roll section in the overall spec. So for these particular shots, in this scene itself, we had a 1200D above her right here and a 600D as well. And again, the sky was already so flat. Her face was already getting a nice level of beauty lighting from the clouds itself. So the 1200D and the 600D were pushing the image to the point where it gave us that nice accent and nice outline of her hair, a little bit of her cheekbone and some of her nose as well. Especially right around here and a little bit of here. Just a nice accent to kind of push that image a little bit further. As many people know, the FX6 is one of the low light kings in the industry right now. And all we did to light this, we put an Aperture MC on a Gobo, and our gaffer, Michael Johnson, Mango Films, waved it back and forth in front of talent. And while Christian, our camera operator, was tracking with talent, same thing. The Gobo was just being back and forth. And this was like a last minute addition. Initially, I wanted to do a whole different setup, but I wanted to try and do something creative day of on location. In my head, I was thinking some sort of, lights passing by at night in the highway. I feel like the effect was met and it looked awesome. The blue light and the little red and green lights in the background, that's just from the location. So we already had so much leveling and layering in the image that I didn't really need to do, but the location played a big part in building this image, scene, and shot. Fire is really cool. And obviously, a lot of times you can't really light a fire in a location. So what we did to compromise on that was we had a VFX supervisor on set. Our initial approach when doing fire was we wanted to make sure that it came across as natural and authentic as possible. So initially we didn't want to incorporate any sort of beauty light with the fire just because it doesn't make a lot of sense for her to be front lit. So what we did was in this scene, we set up an overall layout for where the fire would need to be lighting wise, and then how we can construct it in post digitally. So a lot of the fire you're seeing is practically lit. We had a whole bunch of LED panel lights that we just left open and placed them on the ground to fill up some levels into the room and also motivate a lot of the light that is coming into a fireless room. I think the biggest thing about VFX is incorporating practical elements and also digital elements. We didn't have any sort of practical fire on set, but what we did have were a lot of placed items like these wooden pallets, this oil drum, this other oil drum, and certain props that gave off the reflective quality of what fire can actually be perceived from. Another thing that we did that was super helpful just across the board was wetting down the floors. So if you notice and look at certain scenes, you'll see that there are actual reflective spots from the lights that we placed into the scene. So a lot of the lights that we used here were panel lights. To get that nice silhouette on our talent's face, we used a 6x frame put off to the side right here. There was also a room in here off to the side, and we put in another light in there to just bring up overall levels to incorporate more of that fire effect. Because the biggest thing about fire is making sure that we captured the highlights. Whenever fire is captured on cameras or some sort of media, the highlights typically tend to be overblown. So we wanted to make sure we captured that intensity. So this time around, her face is evenly lit and it's very attractive, soft lighting. Typically you don't really get that in fire, but I think with the introduction of the previous shot, it only makes sense and gives us the space where we can work with that. The basic setup is pretty much the same, but all that we did different was bring up the 6x frame a little bit more in front of her, a little bit closer. The frame provided a nice light to her face and also a nice eye light as well. And with certain blocking, we were able to light the actual product itself pretty nicely too. And that's pretty much it. This is how we lit it. We had a great team and a great time, and everybody really put in the work to make this look more expensive than it actually was. If you have a good pocket of people, you're able to make anything and everything. I hope this video was helpful, and if there's more that you want to know about the process of how we shot this, I'll make a video about it. Thanks for watching, and I hope you have a great day.